Okay, good evening, everyone. I think we're live. Let's double check and just make sure. And looks good. And yeah, there we are. Okay, so uh, this is a special live chat. It's important, first of all, for me to just acknowledge one thing. This chat is in tribute to my Uncle Frank, who just left us. So we're going to be taking care of that over the next couple of days, funeral and all that stuff. But he was one of the major supporters, growing up and whatnot of just a crazy kid getting excited about winter storms and whatnot. Um, and he will be missed. And so this chat is dedicated to him, um, just in memory. One of the little things I guess I can do. Um, but yeah, I don't know what else much more to say about that. It's always a difficult discussion whenever you lose a family member. And of course, many of you have joined the chat tonight on the premium side and also on YouTube because guess what caught up to reality? That's right, the models. What did I tell you guys? You see, eventually, when you follow the observations, the models will eventually catch up to reality. And we are seeing that right now. Now, a couple of caveats here. Okay. The models are going to have a real hard time with dealing with the evolution of this pattern. But there are certain things that we know about this evolution, about this unfolding, that we could take from the past, and we can't go like 30, 40 years because the Arctic is different, but definitely some recent history over the past 10, 20 years to get a good idea of how this is going to evolve. So, a couple of rules here, okay? Especially with if you go back to the winter forecast, definitely check that out. Read it as a refresher after you get done watching this. If you're looking for Miller A storms, the type of storms that come out of the Gulf of Mexico and then shoot right up the coast, that's going to be not very likely in this pattern because it's a La Nina pattern. If you're looking for Miller B storms, which are storms that come into the Tennessee River Valley or Ohio River Valley and then redevelop off the Mid-Atlantic coast, those are the storms we're going to be watching for. And also Clipper type storms that come out of Alberta and swing right across towards the Delmarva Peninsula and rapidly intensify. There's going to be a very good potential for significant, what we call isotropic lifting. You'll probably hear on TV, it's called overrunning, right? They'll describe it as warm air overrunning cold air. We're going to see a lot of those episodes. But the one thing that really catches my eye is the high latitude blocking. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to go over some of the features. We're going to discuss a little bit of a wintry mix concern for this weekend, especially north and west of the major cities. And then I'm going to take your questions and go over everything. It might not go a full hour. We'll see. We'll see just how many questions we have. And if we answer all the questions, then we'll cut it short for the night. And that's all. By the way, also, the next two live chats, the next one's going to be on the 20th, which is a Monday. And then we go back to our Wednesday format right before the new year. So we're going to have a little New Year celebration. So we have a Christmas celebration, New Year celebration, have fun. So let's take a look at the observations here. Now, I want to start off first with the sea surface temperatures here. Okay, it is very clear we have an east-based La Nina, right? So we know that because the coldest anomalies are out here. And what does that mean? Well, it has a specific impact on the 500 millibar pattern. Now, I know that I've probably gone over this for a lot of you guys who already hear this, but just bear with me because it's important to understand the observations to understand why I'm going to say what I'm going to say about the pattern overall. So we know with the east base La Nina, we have a displaced ridge around the Bahamas over Florida. Your storm track is more likely to dig towards, let's say, Texas and Oklahoma, swing out towards the Tennessee River Valley, like those severe thunderstorms that developed. And then depending on the high latitude blocking, either cut up towards the St. Lawrence River Valley or towards the Delmarva Peninsula and over the coastal waters of the northern mid-Atlantic, right? So when there is no negative NAO, when the pattern allows it, you get a low pressure system cut up towards the St. Lawrence River Valley, high threat for severe weather, which is, by the way, expected, and it's not all that unusual in December, despite what you might hear on the news. It's not. So you got that factor, and then you have, when it's blocking, you have a redevelopment off the mid-Atlantic coast. Okay, so that's where we are with the La Nina. The negative PDO pattern supports a deep trough somewhere between the Gulf of Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, which allows for a big ridge to develop somewhere around here, okay, right on the west coast, which allows for Arctic air to pool in western Canada and over the Rockies and then bleed east, which interacts with our subtropical jet stream. Our subtropical jet stream is a little bit more active because of all this above normal water here, and you see this gradient here right around the date line. That gradient sets up convection around the date line. So again, I'm just piecing all this together. I know some of you guys, you already heard this. Trust me, it all makes sense once we combine all these factors. So we have all this tropical forcing. And oh, by the way, anyone that tells you that La Nina is strong or any nonsense like that, well, you just have to go look at the SOI values. Again, the SOI values is that connection between the sea surface temperature anomalies and how that's actually influencing the atmosphere. And when you have values at around 10 or below 10, like what we're seeing here in the 30-day value and the seasonal values, that means we have a weak La Nina. Okay, if these were weak negative values like this, it would be a weak El Nino. So you basically want to stay between about 8 to about 16 or 15 to be in that weak range, and that's essentially where we are at. Meanwhile, you can see live, here is the convection firing up, and our tropical disturbance organizing here. We're starting to see convection firing back up around the date line. A lot of convection out here, which matches up pretty nicely to what's going on with the MJO. The MJO forecast is starting to go from phase 7 to phase 8. Now remember, guys, when the MJO moves from phase 7 to phase 8, you start to support more and more high latitude blocking. The models went from what high latitude blocking to super high latitude blocking like that. Why did it flip? Because the observations forced it. It wasn't models trending or any other type of nonsense like that. The models do not control the weather. The weather controls the models, okay? So if it doesn't have the right data to input, then it's not going to display an accurate solution. Just keep that in the back of your mind, because we'll go back to another factor in our observation, and we'll go from there. So the fact that the MJO is moving into phase 8 and we're starting to see solutions push into phase 1, these are cold signals for the eastern United States, specifically New England and the northern mid-Atlantic and eastern Great Lakes. Meanwhile, what have we been talking about for weeks now? The EP flux. Again, I want to make this very clear. The stronger these vectors, now remember, vectors is the direction and the speed, right? So the longer the vector, the stronger the influence on the atmosphere, right? So we're seeing this stronger influence. Again, I'm going to take my little box here, okay? This is warm air. Warm air at the surface, right? When you're getting this strong vector, it's rapidly pushing it up into the stratosphere. So here's our polar vortex. Here's our warm air. Boom. Okay? That's what's going on here. So the important thing is not whether it's going to break up the 10 millibar polar vortex, because that's pretty far up in the atmosphere. All you really need to do to develop this pattern is to impact 70 millibars on down, which is what we're doing in this environment. And so that's what we're starting to see here. Now, still at 50 millibars and 10 millibars, we're going to see that evolution also starting to see the polar vortex weaken. And there is a lot of data pointing towards around New Year's to early January of a major stratospheric warming event. We're still gathering data on it, but when I'm seeing this in the forecast, and you can also see this on the GFS, this again is a forecast of the EP flux. And remember what I said about the vectors, is forecasted to get even stronger than what we're seeing here in the observations. So we're seeing stronger transport of warmer air towards the stratosphere, which signals a weakening polar vortex and disruption. And you can see that taking place right now in the observations. That's trying to evolve. And this usually happens in several waves. And so we've saw one wave in November, we're seeing one wave now, and another one's expected to develop a little bit later in the month. And so that's why we're seeing these ozone buildup. Again, these are all observations. This is why we're starting to see this ozone buildup take place. Okay, because all that warm air is getting built up, and it's a signal that we're building up mass, right? And so you have to have what we call in science the conservation of mass and energy, right? So if there is an increase in mass in one place, there has to be a decrease in mass in another place. So the atmosphere is always trying to balance it out. So when you're seeing this evolution take place, you know that there's going to be a trigger in order to balance out the atmosphere. And so that brings us to this state where we start to see models starting to catch on to this cold air transport and the evolution of a turn towards a colder weather pattern. So when I take a look at, and you can use the GFS, you can use the European guidance. Let's use the European ensemble guidance here, because I just want to show you something really fast. And okay, now take a look. Let's walk this through. Okay, look at what's happening here, here, and here. There's your blocking setting up. Now, why is this evolution so important? Okay, so we know in the observations we're seeing a specific type of La Nina develop, and it's weak, east base weak. We know what that does to the subtropical jet stream. We also know that we're seeing transport occurring from the troposphere to the stratosphere, weakening the polar vortex, enhancing the potential for high latitude blocking. We also know we have a warm Atlantic Ocean, which means you have a greater chance for cyclogenesis or storm development. So you piece all these together, and what you have is an environment that supports the potential for high latitude blocking to repeat on itself, to basically refeed itself. So once you get it developed, you have this potential here to keep this pattern locked in for quite some time. And what does this pattern support? Well, when I see this evolution, what I see is Arctic air getting fed into the Rockies and then get bled east, while we have storms cutting under this whole Arctic regime and tracking towards the mid-Atlantic coast. I see the potential for severe weather increasing over the Mississippi River Valley and, unfortunately, parts of the Tennessee River Valley. I see a rather warm, wet winter for the southeast, from, let's say, southern Virginia on south. I see this pattern being a real pain in the neck for people in Washington and Baltimore, who are going to be screaming for snow. None will come, or very little will come, I think. But for the Philadelphia metro on north, this pattern is a freaking mess. Why? Well, when you have this type of blocking regime set up and it feeds back on itself, especially when you get this connection set up here, what you end up with is an Arctic high that sits up around, let's say, Maine, that bleeds cold air south. You're going to get warm air trying to push northward into this Arctic regime, and that means, well, much like last year, a lot of wintry mix, a lot of snow, sleet, freezing rain, over to rain, back over to snow. Good luck shoveling that. It's going to be a mess. Meanwhile, the Poconos and Catskills have a pretty good shot of seeing some pretty significant snowfall. This pattern is a perfect pattern for New England for heavy, heavy snowfall. Okay? This is a pattern that ski lovers in the Northeast are going to love. And commuters in the Northern Mid-Atlantic are going to hate, because I see this pattern as one that's going to feature a lot of wintry mixed precipitation events. And so that takes us to the actual forecast here over the next 10 days. And let me pull this up real fast. And so, like I said, enjoy the mild weather while you can, because the first round is going to be coming in on Saturday night into Sunday. Rain for the coast. This looks like mostly rain, maybe a little snow at the very end. But don't be surprised to get like a good light to moderate snowfall for the higher elevations. We'll have more data on this tomorrow morning with some impact maps for you premium members. I already put a preliminary idea out there already. And then we have another storm. This looks like it's suppressed right now. We'll have to keep an eye on it for around Tuesday, but I'm thinking that the way that the pattern's going to be evolving, that more than likely it's going to suppress the subtropical jet stream this time around. But then you see this connection. And see, this is going to be a constant theme right here. This is going to be a scenario where you're going to get these low pressure systems coming out of the plains, picking up enough moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and throw it into this Arctic regime. Nice Arctic high pressure system. Now, I'm not saying this setup is going to be specific or that it is accurate in terms of the details, but what I am saying is that this type of pattern with this type of precipitation setup is going to be something we're going to see a lot. Not powerful storms, but frequent pesky storms that produces snow, sleet, freezing rain, moderate snowfall totals, and every so often we'll get a big storm, where kind of like a President's Day type storm, where you get a lot of isotropic lifting, a lot of waves of low pressure, and a lot of wet, heavy snowfall. I think that's going to be a theme quite a bit, is the impact of heavy, wet snow this year. So that's pretty much where I am right now. I'm going to take your questions, and we'll go from there. And first thing, when I handle the premium section, I'll jump back onto YouTube and check that out and see what we got there. But let's see here. And of course, thank you for the condolences. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Joshua asks, when do you think snow will start flying in the eastern Great Lakes at a steady pace? Oh, wow. Steady pace. I'm not sure what you mean by steady pace, but I definitely think each time, especially after around December 20th, each time you get one of those Arctic air masses building in, you're going to start to see lake effect snow really firing up. I think that Oswego's already seen a pretty good amount of snowfall around Syracuse as well, parts of Buffalo. I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to start to see that expand towards Ohio as well. And let's see here. Okay, GFS EPS analogs, March 2018. Yeah, there's some hints to that. Look, here's my problem with using these analogs. And that is that I have found each pattern has its own unique, I guess you can call it, personality, right? And I have always found it dangerous to advertise these analogs. I like to use them sometimes to study what isn't possible, Like just that's why I didn't say I don't really see much in support of Miller type storms, rather than what is possible, because these anomalies they tend to not take into account all the unique factors of each one of those winters. So, for example, a unique factor this winter that wouldn't be so in other winters is just strong EP flux that we've been talking about, and how that's impacting the stratospheric and tropospheric environments from the bottom up, whereas 2018 was from the top down. And that matters because it makes a difference in whether or not you can get a feedback pattern or not. And also the type of low pressure systems and moisture transport and all that type of stuff. So that matters. But I would say this for the model guidance overall, it hasn't caught up completely to what this pattern is. Okay, there are changes on the way on this guidance, and do not be surprised if 0Z guidance shows some wild solutions, especially GFS. God knows it does that. With major snowstorms, a lot of phantom storms are going to be popping up until the pattern actually develops and the model guidance can pick up on those observations. Right now, there is a ton of chaos and a ton of volatility in the evolution in the models handling this evolution. There always is, and it's never going to change, because no matter how good you make AI, no matter how good you make your computer processing, you're never able to completely handle chaos, which is what this is. It's fluid chaos. Even though the storm track can, let's see, hi Ted. Let's see here. Even though the storm track can't reach the Gulf due to the southeast ridge at the Bahamas and Florida, this is from Card, by the way, is it possible for storms as they cut towards the Mid-Atlantic or Tennessee Valley to redevelop off the coast to pick up Gulf moisture from a southeast feed on the eastern side of circulation? Yes. What I would look for is a negatively tilted trough in the polar jet stream to interact with the subtropical shortwave, to pull in, to create a strong subtropical jet stream out of the Gulf of Mexico and pull that moisture in. What I would look for is a 50-50 upper level low, 50 north, 50 west, to slow down the storm track, to instigate that type of storm, to give it enough time to create that type of transport, and then you can develop that. But I do not expect, let's say, like low pressure systems coming out, like let's say Louisiana, and cutting right up towards the North Carolina coast and all that stuff. That's during a weak El Nino, not weak La Nina. So when we get a weak El Nino, that's when that type of storm returns onto the playing field. Rob Allen asks, how crazy is the sports world right now with all these COVID protocols and players in the NBA and NFL not looking good for Christmas break? Okay, random question. Well, I would say that there's always video games. I don't know what to say. Let's see here. Ted asks, what kind of impact will the changes in La Nina that you talked about this morning have on our winter pattern? Not much, because the idea of La Nina continuing through the winter was already built into the forecast. I am interested in the fact that we're seeing subsurface anomalies, which, let me see if I can pull that up. I think I might have already shut it down on that one. Okay, so basically, under here, about 150 meters below the sea surface, there is much colder water that has redeveloped. And that would suggest that La Nina would extend into spring rather than rapidly collapse. And some of the model guides are trying to capture that now. And what that would mean is that a La Nina-like pattern, which would support a strengthening southeast ridge, would be more likely in the spring. Okay, that is different than what I was thinking and that I had support for 2 weeks ago. So this is going to be an interesting factor for the spring forecast. Okay, In terms of the winter forecast, I think the primary influence in terms of how long winter continues is really going to be locked into the disruptions that will take place with the polar vortex. The more that we see those disruptions, the more likely we will see a continuation of our winter pattern. Card points out that Earth News School 10 millibar image. Let me pull that up. And we'll go to 10 millibars. Okay, let's zoom it out here. Okay, so now we can see a 10 millibar shows a high centered over the Pacific Northwest, which is right here. Okay. What is the impact of that, if any? Also notice the feed into the polar circulation has been displayed, so it's a bit weaker in the Pacific. Cuts across the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic and increases in strength as it moves from the subtropical Atlantic to the poles. He's talking about this one right here. This is a direct result of the polar vortex. Remember I said trying to create a balance? That's what this is. And this is a sign that we are setting up for that disruption that we've been talking about, that we're starting to see in the model guidance now. So that would be, there's that ridge. And there is the start of that displacement. When you start to see this start to show up, that's stretching of the polar vortex and a sign of weakening beginning. And then we're seeing a ton of model guidance from the CFS suggesting a rapid weakening in the lower stratosphere of the winds, which is a strong, very strong sign of rapid weakening of the polar vortex at 50 millibars on down. So we're seeing this. It loads. There we go. See this? Look at this. It looks like it's getting whacked like a piñata. So we're getting all this displacement, and look at this signature here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically what's happening with the model trying to handle is, let's say you take some hard candy with a hammer and you hit that hard candy, then it breaks all over the place. You're trying to figure out where all those pieces go, and that's what the model gun's trying to do. Yep, I know about the Spotless Sun card. Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a redevelopment of the sunspots. We're starting to see that already. How often, let's see, wow, I got a lot of questions here tonight. Yeah, I'm going to catch up on YouTube in just a moment. How often do tornado outbreaks occur in the winter? More so in the southeast and sometimes in the Tennessee River Valley as well. Do they tend to occur more during La Niñas? Last week's outbreak has been impressive for any time of the year. Yeah, I mean, last week's event was tragic and very impressive. They do tend to happen more like in the Tennessee River Valley during La Niñas and more towards the Gulf Coast in El Niños. It's not just any set specific area, it's just a matter of where the climatology sets up in those El Nino or La Nina years. Is it possible that any of the typhoons in the Pacific can affect the teleconnections and cause a dip in the jet stream for the eastern United States? None of them are really that strong right now to support that. There's definitely typhoons developing, but right now I don't see like any what would be a category 4 or 5 type storm impacting the northern Pacific weather pattern. But of course, I'm keeping an eye on it. Good potential for ice storms in the I-95 corridor? Yes. Yes. In fact, I highlighted that many times in the winter forecast. Be prepared for snow, sleet, and freezing rain this year. What do you expect for the Saturday afternoon in Union County? I have a disappointment. This is from Card. Mostly right around Union County, mostly rain right now. But definitely stay tuned with the forecast, as I'll be updating them. We get better data on that time period. Joshua asks, what causes the very cold air in Alaska over the last month? Do you see any of it locking into the eastern United States. That's because you had all the cold air building in Alaska and in the Arctic because the polar vortex was strong. It strengthened. It locked the cold air in. It locked the freezer door, right? So when you lock the freezer door, the freezer gets colder because the cold air is building on itself, okay? So that's what we're seeing in Alaska. Now the freezer door is opening up and all that cold air is heading south. First towards the Rockies and then bleeding east. Is the feedback easier to achieve when it's bottom up rather than top down? Depends on mountain torque, the state of tropical forcing. La Nina is easier to pull off, especially, actually, let me rephrase that. Weak La Ninas and weak El Ninos, it's easier to pull off. A strong La Nina or strong El Nino, it's very difficult because there's too much interference going on. But definitely a better chance of doing from bottom up because you have a better chance of impacting the stratosphere troposphere couplet rather than top down. Top down needs more work. Joshua says also you see frequent snowstorms on the eastern Great Lakes like northeast Ohio. Yes, Joshua, there will be a potential for more snowstorms or snow events. Frank Walter asks, how much are you paying attention to GFS versus European? I pay attention to both, but I recognize that, well, Europeans kicking the GFS butt in terms of verification scores. I use the GFS and European both, depending on day to day how each one's handling the observations. But I mean, what can I say? I go to the WPC discussions where they talk about model error and if anything's missing. And more times than not, they're taking out the GFS and leaving in the European guidance for their forecast as well because of missing data, poor resolution, poor handling of observations that are put into the guidance, you name it. It's disappointing. I would love to see the GFS catch up to the European, but it's going to take a lot of work. A lot of work. Thomas asks, do you think we see a snowstorm before the end of December for areas like northwestern New Jersey, northeastern in the Hudson River Valley? Yeah, I do. I do think that it's going to be a potential. I am very, very suspicious of the time period between, say, Christmas and New Year's. I keep an eye on that time period. I'm very, very curious to see what might pop up there. And also this weekend in those same areas, a pretty good chance for like maybe a light to moderate snowfall event. Cardax is it significant that the subsurface anomalies that got colder are still east-based? Yes, it is. It means we continue to see support for east-based La Nina. And if I recall correctly, aging east-based La Ninas usually have that cold shift more westward, and it doesn't seem like that's happening this time around. Yet. It's still early, but that will eventually happen because all the La Ninas, they shift to that west and then they degrade and die. That's true with every La Nina ever recorded. And that will happen with this La Nina more likely in the spring. Thank you, Ted, for your condolences. Matthew asks, do you think the GFS is overdoing the Southeast Ridge in week 2? Yes, I think the GFS is having some serious amplification issues, convective feedback problems, especially in the tropical Pacific. It's having some issues with overdoing the ridge dynamics in the high latitude blocking and trying to break down some ridges too fast and amplifying others too much. So yeah, GFS is just, well, lovely. When the polar vortex weakens and displaces is when the AO goes negative. That's essentially the theme, yes. Okay, now let's check out YouTube because have a bonanza going on YouTube. Holy Bob Dole, look at that. Wow. Well, okay, guys. You guys on YouTube have been over an hour tonight. Wow. Okay. Wow. All right, so I'm going to catch up on YouTube. Let's go through some of these. Let's see. There's South America. Blessing. Thank you. Thank you guys for the condolences. Let's see. Super chat is $ under. Okay. All right. What is super chat? It's something that YouTube added. I really don't control it. You can give like I guess like a tip. Like, hey, you're cool. Like, like the guy on the New York street corner that plays the saxophone really bad, but thinks he's like an amazing artist that's just undiscovered, and someone leaves $1. That's essentially it. You know. Let's see here. More like a tip. Yep. Let's see. Wow, there is a lot of stuff here. Here. Oh, there it is. All right, so let's go to Kenneth. All right. Is it true that Europe first is getting very cold? Yes, it's true. And that we'll get cold here in January? Does this pattern remind you of 95, 96? I know who's been saying 95, 96. Starts with a J. And ends with a last name in B. Okay, so first of all, we will start seeing colder weather by December 20th. We'll start to see that step down start to take place. Europe is actually going to get blitzed. And it's just that they're closer to the Arctic Circle, so they're going to see that first and really bleed into much of Europe. In terms of 95, 96, let me explain something with 95, 96. 95, 96 is like, I'm going to use a baseball term here, a perfect game. Okay? It is one of the most epic winters I've ever experienced. Everything unfolded perfectly. Perfect game, right? Perfect game with 20 strikeouts. Get my point? It couldn't have been better. We are in the first inning and we struck out the side. That's where we're at. Okay? So there are some people saying, well, since he struck out the side and everything looks the same, we have the same outfielders and this and that. So therefore, we're going to have the same results as 95, 96. That's really, really dangerous to say because you're talking about a top 3 winter in terms of snowfall. I don't have the data to make that claim because in order for that to happen, you have to have the high latitude blocking feedback on itself in such a way that locks in a perfect blocking mechanism to force every low pressure system that develops to track through Delaware over our coastal waters and dump tons of moisture into an Arctic air mass constantly for 4 weeks straight. I don't have the data to support that announcement. I don't. Is there factors that could support that theme? Yes. Will that evolve? I have no idea. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying you'd be looking for the perfect baseball game, for the perfectly pitched game. And that could happen every night in baseball, but that doesn't mean it will because you never know. Someone could create an error, or in this case, in meteorology, the block could be a little bit too far west or a little bit too far east. All right, it's kind of like the Goldilocks. You have to have everything just right. If it's a little bit too hot or a little bit too cold, not going to work. So that's why I don't like using that year as an example. Let's see here. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot. Okay. Mm-hmm. What will be Central Pennsylvania potential? It kind of depends on where you're at in Central Pennsylvania, but I do think that they're going to see an active year this year. What's going to be curious with locations like to the east of Pittsburgh and like between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is if you have these transitioning low pressure systems going from the Tennessee River Valley and jumping towards the Mid-Atlantic coast, there's sometimes this breaking up of the precipitation shield because you have lifting going from one area and then jumping to the coast. And so when that happens, sometimes parts of central Pennsylvania, especially north central Pennsylvania, kind of loses out in the potential for the steadiest snowfall. So we'll have to watch out for each storm, but then you kind of make it back up with lake effect snow behind the storms. A lot of people seem very pessimistic with this change. Keep talking about East Base versus West Base NAO. What are your thoughts? Um, I don't see much support. I mean, all right, hold it. Let's just pull up the data, shall we? I'll tell you what. Let's use the GFS Ensembles guidance. Okay, and we'll do 12Z because I hate 18Z guidance. And what do we have here? Well, there's some people that try to claim that this is an East baseline negative NAO. They would be wrong. An East base negative NAO has these below normal heights out here, and this ridge doesn't get past the east coast of Greenland. This is pretty close to a west base negative NAO pattern. It builds into northeastern Canada. It's pretty strong. And oh, by the way, it sets up a couplet with portions of the ridge in the Pacific. Want to see something even cooler? Take a look at this. This is the EPS weeklies. So let's walk through this. This goes all the way through January. Now, again, never take any of this verbatim, but you kind of see where it's going here. Look at that ridge building towards Canada. Look at the extension. So what do you have here as you have that evolution? You have that connection taking place. Now, it tries to lose it, as models often do, once you get towards the end of the model. The reason why you don't take this aspect right here too much as a lock or anything of that nature is because you start to lose resolution, okay? Or basically your HDTV becomes standard, okay? So you still have the indication of some sort of ridge here, some sort of ridge here. It's trying to figure out what to do with the polar vortex here. There seems to be a split starting to develop here. And you still have ridge in the west, trough in the east. So you have a lot of noise here once you get out to this point. But if you're out in this time period where the resolution is much higher, towards the middle of January, well, hey, there's your ridge here, there's your ridge here, there's your high latitude blocking, and what you end up with is your storm track cutting towards the mid-Atlantic coast. I don't see what's to be pessimistic about. I mean, it's sure as heck better than having a raging southeast ridge over the eastern United States. But some people just like to be pessimistic. And some people just like to say warm, warm, warm all the time. Let's see. You just don't have any good injection of Arctic air for New Jersey. This really isn't a massive of a pattern change. I'd have to disagree, Michael, for several reasons. One, if you're looking, all right, so first of all, if you're looking for, like, let's say 10 degrees for highs, that's not this pattern. That's not La Nina patterns. That's El Nino patterns. So you're looking at the wrong type of pattern. So your expectations are skewed. The core of the Arctic air is going to be over the Rockies and over the northern plains. The difference is that instead of it being 55, it's going to end up being more like around 35 or 30, which is colder. Now, we're not there yet because we're in the middle of our mild pattern right now. The colder pattern is going to step down and get colder and colder. So I'd have to fundamentally disagree with your analysis on this idea. But also, let me make it very clear. The core of the sustained Arctic air is going to be in locations like Green Bay, locations like the Central Great Lakes, locations like Toronto. And then that Arctic air, which is going to be up in here, is going to get fed into our region via high pressure systems. Thus, in the forecast is why I have in the winter forecast transient cold as a theme. Let's see here. Let's see. See, Stephen Lampertain, I think I pronounced that right. He has the right idea, Michael. Cold air is in Canada. High over St. James Bay is going to bring the cold air down. Exactly. Let's see here. Oh man, I'm going to try and catch up to as many questions as I can, but wow. What is what is the difference between the stratosphere warming up from the lower levels to the upper levels and the other way around? The other way around is driven more by solar impacts, like a quiet sun. And so you start to see warming take place at 10 millibars via wind shifts and the QBO factors. And then that bleeds down towards the lower part of the stratosphere and eventually the troposphere. It takes longer to impact the troposphere because you have to have it bleed down. Think of it like having maple syrup and waiting for it to bleed down a slope. It's very slow, very sludge-like. So it takes longer to evolve. Let's see here. I was there in Blizzard. Let's see here. Any questions? Let's go back to, I think I got everything. And let me go back. Let's see here.
Daniel Robinson, how cold will it get in New York City? Did you get that far?
I think I did. I might have missed that one. Or maybe it just loaded. How cold will... All right. I expect them to be slightly below normal. We're talking about 30s, 40s. During winter storms, definitely in the 20s and 30s. But nothing. I really don't foresee like any like major significant Arctic outbreaks. That doesn't mean that there won't be a Arctic outbreak, but I don't see like a type of setup where you have 2 weeks of 20-degree highs and just brutal cold. You might have a day or two of that, and then you kind of go back to your 30s, 40s, and your wintry mix type situations and stuff like that. When the polar let me go back here. Any weather impacts on the NFL games this weekend? Oh, good question.
A lot more on YouTube. I know you do.
I do.
You do. You're missing like.
All right. Well, what? Hold on, let me answer this, and then we'll try to catch up. Man, oh man, it's been a busy night. Thank you guys. That is awesome. Let's see.
I don't know how it's loading there versus how I'm seeing it, but like I just see. Okay.
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see here. The football games this week honestly doesn't look too bad. There might be some things I don't know if Seattle's playing at home, but that might be a bit interesting. Tampa Bay should be fine. Honestly, I'm not seeing much in terms of major impacts for the games this weekend. On the areas where you expect more snow, will it be a powdery type of snowfall? That's going to depend on each storm and what air mass dynamics. It's really hard to say. Statistically speaking, the further away you are from a water source, the more likely you'll have powdery snow. But that's, again, going to be dependent on each storm and each evolution. Yeah, exactly with 95, 96. Is it safe to say at this point that January won't feature above normal temperatures? Oh, that's a good question. I think there's a better chance to end up with above normal temperatures down towards Cape May and southern New Jersey, and more likely to be below normal temperatures in the Poconos and Catskills. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we are going to be right in the middle of that battle zone and a very tight thermal gradient. And I would not be surprised if that warm air wins out in Cape May and Atlantic City while we get stuck with cold air in central New Jersey, the portions of the Delaware River Valley around Philadelphia, New York City Metro, and stays very cold in the northern interior. It's going to be that type of a gradient, that tight, okay? Where Atlantic City for the winter or for January could be plus 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit or plus 1, while, Allentown or even Sussex, New Jersey can end up being a degree below normal for the month. It's going to be that crazy. Let's check back up towards YouTube. And you know what I might have to do is refresh this.
Might have to.
Let's see.
You want to pick up a Daniel Lamont.
Let's see what I can find here.
Asked about Miller A and Miller B.
Oh, all right. Let's see here. Wow.
It's like right below where you were just answering. So.
Stratosphere, measure roads.
Came in at like 8:34, so it's like 10 minutes ago. Actually, it's over that. Jeez,
Okay.
I just looked at the time and went, oh wait, never mind.
I tell you what. Why don't I'll just answer them. You feed them to me, I'll answer them because I can't seem to find them. So, difference between Miller A and Miller B.
What type of storm produces more pure now for the New Jersey area, Miller A or Miller B?
Oh, all right. Miller A storms are more likely to produce more more pure snowfall events because Miller B storms is where you have to redevelop the storm, and sometimes that means you have to pull cold air into the coastal plain to get that changeover. Whereas Miller A, the air mass dynamics and the structure of the storm is already established. It's just a matter of where that storm track is, and so you're more likely to get that sustained snowfall from beginning to end because there's nothing to change over or transition to. Next question.
Okay, so we have a whole lot of cheering section going on too.
Okay.
Excuse me while I scroll and try to retain my voice. Let's see, Alcina Iwazali. I'm probably brutalizing that beautiful name.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between the stratosphere warming up from the lower levels to the upper levels versus the other way around?
Okay, I think I answered that one before, but basically, the setup from the top of the stratosphere down, okay, it takes a while for it to bleed down. It's usually driven by solar factors, sometimes the QBO. Where coming up, that's all driven by this transport. Whoops, if I can find it there. It's in one of these. This one right here. This transporter taking air, warmer air, up into the stratosphere, which means that it impacts the upper level pattern faster. Let's see here. I'm down to flood weather. Can you look at the latest extended GFS ensembles that are coming out right now?
Yeah, that just came through. Yeah.
Yep. So I guess the refresh worked, I guess. Okay, well, let's see what we got here. Is that the 18Z? I'm looking for it, looking for the data. Give me a second. Well, let me also check.
Seem to have quite the fan club going on YouTube.
I see. Let's see here. Well, it's still rolling in. Let me let this load in, and then I'm going to let me answer some of these quick premium questions here. See, cardiacs is those kind of temperature contrasts, if they pan out, feed into more active weather, don't they? Absolutely. It leads to more cyclogenesis, more storm development. Not always intense storms, but what you end up with is like a stationary boundary and waves of low pressure, and that's where you can get successive waves of precipitation and winter storm type impacts. Joshua asks, do you see any similarities to winter 93, 94, where there was a lot of mixing events on the coast? No. Different tropical forcing, different stratospheric evolution, not really something I would use as an example. What will temperatures be on Christmas Day? I don't know yet. And I say I don't know yet because there's far too much volatility in just handling of the 500 millibar pattern to get a handle on storm tracks and frontal positions. So it's kind of hit and miss right now. So I really don't know right now. But I'll be happy to go back on that question and answer it when we have our live chat on Monday. Okay, so be sure to ask that again. So let's take a look at the GFS guidance that's loaded in here. And we still have our strong negative NAO to start to develop. Hello, Monster Ridge around the Pacific. Let's see what it tries to do here. Okay, so in this, let's go 10 days out, is trying to support the below normal heights around the Atlantic. Here's our ridge. It's building in. It's squeezing, pushing down on the polar vortex. You see a nice trough over the Pacific Northwest. This allows Arctic air to build into here and then bleed in. Okay? When you see this setup, this sets up convergence and confluence right around Maine. So you get your cold air to build in. And then moving forward, oh, this is beautiful. Okay, so again, you never take this stuff verbatim, but okay, you have your ridge in the Pacific building into the Arctic Circle, ridge in the Atlantic building into the Arctic Circle, squeezing the polar vortex south, most likely dropping in around here, while you have a negative NAO here, probably about a 50 north, 50 west upper level low here. Okay, so what this does is that it sets up a storm track where you have storms coming in from the Pacific, probably giving a nice little precipitation event for the Pacific Northwest, Central Rockies, redevelops a low out here in the plains. Your Arctic air is bleeding in here. You probably have a nice high pressure system up there. And you have your storm track somewhere around here. Somewhere between, let's say, Ohio, cutting through New Jersey, or Kentucky, cutting through Delaware. And you have this block here, so you keep the cold air into the coastal plain. And it's just a beautiful thing. This is, during a La Nina year, if you get this, can't be mad about it. I mean, it's a great pattern for if you are interested in active winter weather. This right here really isn't a ridge. It just has above normal heights, a really tight gradient here. So this tells me you're going to have a lot of short waves coming in with the subtropical jet stream that are going to be kind of torn apart, but they'll be weak enough to interact with the polar jet stream to amp up any low pressure system and transport moisture into this event. And then you have all your Arctic air in here trying to press south. Now let's take a look at, let's see what it tries to do with the 850 millibar temperatures. I wonder if it's going to create the same error it did last time. Okay, see there's your transient cold air. Okay, so what it's trying to do is it's trying to send all this Arctic air south. It sends it into the Rockies first. See how it bleeds in like this? This may not be completely accurate. See, what this might be is a situation where you have your core, your Arctic air up here, high pressure's here, 850 millibars is just barely cold enough, but then you have a shallow Arctic air mass building in from this source here, building its way south. You see kind of like this very faint cold air damming signature that shows up right here? That's what I think is showing up here. So again, you don't take anything verbatim. And again, notice how, look at the type of gradients that's set up as a result of this. And this is several days out. So this is a hell of a gradient here setting up. So we're going to be in for a battle. Let's see here. Hockey X's, if my recollection is correct, 95-96 had low-level Arctic air where the forecast was during storms, and temperatures were forecast to warm up, which never really happened. So we had a lot of colder storms than expected. That was somewhat true. 95-96, people always remembered the major storms, but also there was massive flooding, especially around mid-January, where we had a massive warm-up and a lot of rain. And then we went back to cold again, and we entered that period in February, which was historic. But between that, we had the January blizzard, then we had a massive warm-up, and then we had a cold wave again. And you're right, Card. The models never handle low-level cold air very well. So that's always a problem. Let's see here. Was 2003 a Miller B storm? This is back towards YouTube. I'd have to be a little bit more specific. You mean Miller B storm events? I don't think so, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head. They came out with the GFS 0Z. Yep, we checked that out. On GEGS, cold air bleeds down around the 26th. GFS, okay. GEPS has cold air infiltrating down on the 25th to the end of the month. Yep, that doesn't surprise me at all. Let me reset navigation here. And we'll do United States. And let's see here. Yeah, this ought to work. Now this is the 12Z. It's kind of the Canadian version. And you can kind of see in each one of these models they depict it in their own unique way. But take a look at how it's setting it up. Like I said, all your Arctic air is here. This is your freezer. And then there is someone leaving the freezer door open and the cold air comes in. That's our winter. Our winter is freezer door locked and loaded. Someone opened up the freezer. Here comes the cold air and storms. There it is. There's our winter. All right. So it is 9:01. We still have a couple more questions. Let me knock this out, and then we'll cut it down for tonight. It seems that most models have already handled that one. Oh, the President's Day weekend. Oh, okay. Okay. The 2003 reference was for the President's Day weekend storm. That was not a Miller B. That was a situation where you had an Arctic front that stalled out and you had waves of low pressure developing in Oklahoma. You could say it developed first as an Oklahoma Clipper, or basically almost every shortwave low is like called a Clipper. But basically the theme is that it developed out here, and then you had this Arctic front that stalled out, and wave after wave of low pressure started to develop until we got a stronger one that really amplified in around the coastal waters here and really bombed this whole region with heavy snowfall. But it wasn't one shot, it was a persistent shot. If the MJO doesn't go into phase 8 and 1, how much does the things change? It would change significantly, but let me explain to you why that's not going to happen. The reason why that's not going to happen is because your tropical forcing, your development of La Nina, your mountain torque evolution, and your vertical transport all force the MJO into phase 8 and 1. This forecast, this evolution of the pattern is not because of the MJO. The MJO is simply giving us the traffic lights. Okay? The MJO this year is not a driver, it is an enhancement. Okay? It's in terms of workout terms, it's not your bench press, it's just the pre-workout. Okay? So the MJO is simply giving us a heads up that things are changing, that the pattern's changing. But the MJO wave is being forced by other mechanisms. All those mechanisms which we have described before. La Nina, the EP flux, and so on. Some models show MJO go back to phase 6 before going to phase 8. Some models do. I think that's more of an error. That's sometimes a feature of convective feedback. I would not be surprised if we go more towards like a brief neutral phase and then into phase 8 rather than going back all the way to phase 6 and then off to phase 8. Do you think that delays things? I don't think it will happen, so it shouldn't delay things based on what I'm seeing here, based on what I'm seeing with the way the pattern's evolving. Okay, it is 9:04. I think I'm going to call it a night. My voice is starting to get a little raspy. Let's see if there's anything else. No, I think that's pretty much it. I think that I want to thank all you guys for joining. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for all the questions. And I think that, again, we'll be back at this again, live chat, on Monday, 8 o'clock, and we'll be back. And then we also have, see here, and then we'll have one more right before the end of the Wednesday before the new year. We'll have another one of those live chats, and then we'll call it a year, and then we get ready for the next year. So thank you again, and I will see you guys around. Oh, and by the way, Thursday no videos. So just want to make that very clear, but all the tech stuff. Have a wonderful night, and as always, stay safe out there.